Hi. So today we are going to look at Euclidean rings. Now the motivation for this class of rings comes from our ordinary Euclidean algorithm that we have in the ring of integers, which is you already know, but still let us recall it once more. We are given two integers a and b, say, where b is non-zero, and we are trying to divide a by b. That's how we say it, and if we do so, we will get unique integers q and r, where q is called a quotient and r is a remainder, such that a is equal to qb plus r, where the remainder r satisfies these inequalities. Okay, so this is our ordinary Euclidean algorithm. I believe that we have already proved in some form in section 1.3, which treats the set of integers. It may not be in this general form where a and b are any integers, but where b is a positive integer, that we have definitely proved, either in section 1.3 or I think in Terence Tau's analysis 1, where we discussed the system of natural numbers. There we have proved it. Now the thing is that besides the ring of integers, there are some other rings which exhibit something similar. In those rings also, there is a version of this Euclidean algorithm. That's why such rings are called Euclidean rings collectively. So today we are going to study this class of rings generally. So let us now look at the formal definition of a Euclidean ring. So a part of the definition you can understand will involve this Euclidean algorithm in some form. So the definition goes like this. An integral domain R is said to be a Euclidean ring if to each element a not equal to 0 in R, there is assigned a non-negative integer d of a, such that the following properties hold. The first property is this: for any two elements a and b in R, both of which are non-zero, the d value of a is less than or equal to the d value of ab, and number 2 is the one which has that division algorithm type of situation. For any a and b belonging to R, where b is non-zero, there exist elements q and r in R such that A is equal to QB plus R, and where either R is equal to 0. Okay, let me just refill. Either R is 0 or the D value of R is strictly less than the D value of B. Okay, so let us see what this definition says. We are starting with an integral domain R, and to every non-zero element in R we are assigning a non-negative integer D of A. That means this D is a function which takes as input non-zero elements in the integral domain, and the outputs are non-negative integers. Okay, so now what these two conditions say? The first one says that if we have two non-zero elements in the ring, then the D value of A is less than or equal to the D value of AB. Note that A is non-zero, so D of A makes sense. But what about AB? Since A and B are both non-zero and we are in an integral domain, so their product is also non-zero. So D of AB also makes sense, and these are two non-negative integers. They satisfy this inequality. And the second one is just division algorithm in this general setup. So here also we have two ring elements, one of which is non-zero. So we are sort of dividing the other, which is not necessarily non-zero, by the one which is non-zero, and we are going to get two elements, quotient and remainder. Although in this setup I am not sure that they are called quotient and remainders. I don't think they are named so. We just get two elements Q and R, such that A is equal to QB plus R, and where this remainder type of thing, this element is either 0 or its D value is less than the D value of the divisor. Note that since this is a general integral domain, so unlike integers we cannot simply write R less than B. That may not make any sense, because in the ring of integers, besides the algebraic structure, we also have an order relation, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. Those things are available for integers, but in a general ring that may not be available. However, this makes sense because these D values themselves are non-negative integers. Okay, so this is the definition of a Euclidean ring. So considering the source of this definition, it is natural that the ring of integers is a Euclidean ring. So let us continue by mentioning that naturally the ring of integers is a Euclidean ring where D of A is equal to absolute value of A for every integer A not equal to 0. Okay, so in this case, in that particular case of the ring of integers, the D value is the absolute value function. Besides the ring of integers, The Gaussian integers also form a Euclidean ring. Gaussian integers are complex numbers whose real and imaginary parts are both ordinary integers. In fact, let us just write that here. A Gaussian integer is a complex number a plus ib, where a comma b are integers. This also forms a Euclidean ring with a particular d function. We will study this one in the next section. Why we mention this? From the results of this section, the present section, and the next, which treats Gaussian integers we shall be able to prove a classic result from number theory. Due to Farman, which says that prime numbers of a special form are squares of two integers. Those of you who are familiar with this part of number theory, they may already know this result, and you may have proved this result by number theoretic techniques. However, it can also be proved from the properties of Euclidean rings that we will do in the next section, which states that any prime number of the form 4n plus 1. You may already know that odd prime numbers come in two different forms: those that leave the remainder 1 when divided by 4, and those that leave the remainder 3 when divided by 4. So the ones which look like this, which are congruent to 1 modulo 4, they can be written as sum of two squares of integers. Written as a sum of two squares. We do not mention squares of integers because in the context of this result, it is understood that we are taking integers. And apart from these two examples of Euclidean rings, there is one more example which is very important. It is the ring of polynomials in one variable where the coefficients are coming from a field. This also turns out to be a Euclidean ring with its own d function. Now, this ring is very important, and its generalizations where instead of one variable we have many variables is they are very important in algebraic geometry, and also I think in algebraic number theory. Particularly this ring where there is only one variable is important in one part of linear algebra, where we have that concept of the minimal polynomial of a linear operator over a finite dimensional vector space, and the result that tells us that such minimal polynomial exists, it comes from a result. I mean, the result that tells this thing will now be treated, will now be proved and stated and proved. The result involves ideals in a Euclidean ring. It says that in Euclidean rings, ideals are of a special form. So let us go through that result. This is our first result in this section, which comes as theorem 371, the first theorem of section 3.7. Let R be a Euclidean ring and A be an ideal of R. Then A is of this form, A naught R. We have already seen this type of ideal in the exercises in some previous sections. This is the ideal generated by this single element A, which basically is nothing but the set of all multiples of that element by ring elements. So the result now states that every ideal is of this form. This type of ideals have a name also. They are called principal ideals. They are generated by a single element. It's somewhat like the cyclic subgroup generated by a single element in a group, something like that. Okay, so it says that every ideal in a ring is in a Euclidean ring is a principal ideal. We have to prove that for some element in A actually. Okay, so let us see how the proof goes. Let's first handle the trivial case where A has only the zero element. If A is the zero ideal, then we can choose A naught equal to 0, and our job is done, because if A naught is 0, this set has only the 0 element. Multiply any element of the multiply 0 of the ring by any element of the ring, you are going to get 0. Okay, so in this case the result is true. Now assume that A is a non-zero ideal. That means there are non-zero elements in A. Okay. Now I am going to write a statement and I will explain where that is coming from. Let A naught belonging to A be an element such that D of A naught is minimal. Why would such an element exist for which the D value would be minimal? I don't know whether you are familiar with something known as the well ordering principle. If not, let me just state it. Suppose you have the set of natural numbers, which I am just including 0, okay. It does not really matter whether you call it the set of natural numbers or not, that does not matter. And it has a non-empty subset, say B. Then B has a smallest element. Always, whatever B is, it will have a smallest element. This can be proved, and we will prove it at one point when we in analysis 1 by Terence Tao, when we get to well ordered sets, there we will prove this. We are going to use this here to conclude this statement. In place of the set B, now our special B is this: D of A such that A belongs to A minus 0. Is this B a non-empty set? It is a non-empty set because according to our assumption, A is non-zero. So there is at least one A in this set whose D value is there, which is a non-negative integer. So this is a non-empty subset of the set of all non-negative integers. So there will be a minimum D value. That minimum, however, may be attained at several different A's. There may not be a unique A for which D of A is minimum. There may be many A's. A naught is one such A. So we can choose, there will exist an element A naught in A for which D of A naught is minimal. To be more specific, let me just, instead of writing A, let me just write A minus 0. Be an element such that this. Okay, so that's why A naught exists. Okay, now our aim is to show that A is equal to A naught R. Since A naught belongs to A, we have A naught R as a subset of A. Why is that so? It's because if you take any element A naught x, say in A naught R, since A naught belongs to A, from the second condition for an ideal, A is an ideal, keep that in mind. It is given that A is an ideal, so any multiple of A naught by any ring element will again be in A, and such multiples constitute the set A naught R. So A naught R is a subset of A. Now we have to prove the reverse inclusion. Okay. Now let A belonging to A be any element note that A is any element. After all, every element we are choosing is ultimately in the Euclidean ring R. So A naught is in R and A is also in R, and A naught is not equal to 0. So we can apply the second condition from the definition of a Euclidean ring with these two elements A and A naught. Then there exist elements Q and R belonging to R. Keep in mind that since we are applying the second condition in the Euclidean ring R, Q and R belong to R. We cannot say that Q and R belong to A because it's not given that A is a Euclidean ring. R is a Euclidean ring. So two such elements exist such that A is equal to Q A naught plus R, where either R is 0 or the D value of R is strictly less than the D value of A naught. Okay, so this is just we have applied the second condition. Now let's look at this equation. A is equal to Q A naught plus R. Now R is equal to A minus Q A naught. Since A and A naught are both elements in the ideal A, R is equal to A minus Q A naught is also an element in A. How? Q A naught is in A because capital A is an ideal and A naught belongs to A. Small a is already in A. We have chosen small a to be an element of A. So their difference is also in A because A is after all a subgroup under addition. So from there we are getting the fact that R is also an element in A. Okay. The minimal nature of D A naught then forces us to conclude that R is equal to 0. You see, either R is 0 or this inequality is true. Suppose this inequality is true, then we have a problem. What is that problem? R is an element of A, so its D value cannot be smaller than D of A naught because according to us, A naught is an element of A which has minimum D value. So how can another element R in A have still smaller D value than the minimum? Because then this minimality is contradicted. So that's why this condition cannot be true. So our only possibility is R equal to 0. Thus, now if R is 0, what do we get? A is equal to Q A naught. And Q A naught is a multiple of A naught. So this belongs to A naught R. Actually it belongs to R A naught, but since we are in an integral domain which by definition is a commutative ring, so the order does not matter, which implies so any element A in A has been proven to also be in A naught R. So A is also a subset of A naught R. So now we can combine these two containing two inclusion relations. Thus, A is equal to A naught R. So this completes the proof. And we are now going to, although I think we have used a notation for this principal ideals generated by a single element, which however now we are going to define. We have used it previously without defining. Let us just mention it. We introduce the notation like this. Okay, this is also available in group theory. By this notation we sometimes denote the cyclic subgroup generated by A. So since this is a similar situation, so we use the same notation. To denote the ideal generated by A. For in groups we have subgroup, in rings we have ideal. Ideal generated by A. Let us also mention which is the set of all multiples of A in the ring R. In the ring R means the elements by which we are multiplying A naught. Oh, A, this is A, this is not A naught. These elements are coming from R. Okay, now next we are going to define something else. An integral domain R is an integral domain R with a unit element is said to be a principal ideal ring if for every ideal A in R there exists an element A belonging to A such that A is equal to the principal ideal generated by A. So that means a principal ideal ring is an integral domain which has a unit element and in which every ideal is a principal ideal. Now we have seen that in a Euclidean ring every ideal is a principal ideal. Now if we can show that every Euclidean ring also has a unit element, then it will tell us that every Euclidean ring is a principal ideal ring, and that is true. Euclidean rings have unit elements. I don't think any other class of rings has this property. I am not aware if there is any other class, but this is pretty general and strange that all Euclidean rings have unit elements, and that is in fact our a corollary. We will come to that corollary, but before that there are some remarks. Okay, once we by the way, in this context I should also mention one more thing. We have named this type of rings Euclidean rings. Sometimes they are also known as Euclidean domains. Like we have integral domain, we also sometimes call the same things Euclidean domains. And this type of rings, in this definition, they are sometimes known as principal ideal domains, in short PID. Okay, you may have seen this abbreviation somewhere. PID means principal ideal domain, an integral domain with unit element, don't forget this, okay, in which every ideal is a principal ideal. There are other classes of rings also known as UFD, unique factorization domain. We will see that. Once we prove that